Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world-class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet podcast. I'm your host, Beau Higgins. I have the pleasure today to be joined by Adam Frankl. And for those that don't know about the MilVet and what we do, our goal in life is to help veterans transition primarily into private equity and venture capital-backed portfolio companies, and to help companies that are looking for veteran talent in the VC PE space to find that talent. But with the podcast, we bring on a lot of different guests and talk about their transition stories and how they got from whether they had a military background or not, kind of their transition and how they got from their point to where they are today. And hopefully it'll inspire some of our listeners to help their journey as they continue to transition. But with that, I would love to introduce Adam and maybe talk a little bit about your background. Adam?
Hi, Beau. Thank you very much. Should I talk about my Army experience first, or what I'm doing now?
Start with your military experience and kind of what was the motivation for you to maybe join the military? Did you have it in your family? What was kind of the inspiration to get into the military? Go back to the very beginning there, you know?
That's a great question. I don't think it was any one thing. I definitely come from a military family. My father and my uncle served. My grandfather served in World War I. And as a remarkable coincidence, I ended up serving in the same unit that my grandfather served in World War I. So that was a great deal of fun as well. I would be remiss if I said that winning an ROTC scholarship didn't play a big role in my decision, as I went in at a time when the scholarship paid for 100% of tuition. So that was pretty compelling too. But also, I love the idea of serving my country. And I also love the idea, I sort of knew that I would spend the majority of my career behind a desk. And I figured, all right, let's figure out how to do something else for a while before I end up doing that. So that's why I branched infantry.
Got it. No, I think, as a Marine I didn't even know I was going to join the military until I was finishing up my college career and had no expectation that I would end up being in for 25 years. But again, you never know how that path is going to take. And obviously from being able to have the opportunity alone to be in ROTC and then to have a career or go into the infantry it's the backbone of the military, right? You got to have our grunts out there that are working it every day. But what I guess I would maybe to talk a little bit about your military career and highlights that you had, or things that maybe influences that you had during your military career that stuck with you as you kind of progressed through your career today.
So let me talk about being infantry, right? Is that you have to learn to love the suck. I know that's a Marine Corps phrase,
Yeah.
but when I first heard it, it's like, yeah, it's like that is so true. And I've been in startups as a founder or early executive for 3 decades now. And there's a lot of loving the suck in startups too. Okay. A lot of it is just grit and pain and just bearing with it and saying, isn't there anyone else who can do this? And the answer is no, right? You just need to bear through it, right? At the same time, right, there is a lot of intellectual thinking that goes into the Army, and especially, the infantry. And if anything, what I've learned about the Marine Corps is that, contrary to popular perception, the Marine Corps is actually more intellectual than the Army. I'm specifically talking about the adoption of Robert Boyd and the OODA loop. And when I studied that, and later on in startups, it became obvious that here's where it's applicable. But I've learned a tremendous amount from my time in the Army, and I figured out how to apply that to startups in order to make them more successful. And a lot transfers, a lot more than most veterans think.
Yeah, I think that's some great points you made there, and I'll go back to your kind of transition in particular. But I do think that there is oftentimes maybe a narrative or an expectation. Oh, you joined the military because you couldn't do anything else in life, and you're not that intellectually smart. But I mean, the reality is, and you know it, and guys that have joined know it. I mean, you get more formal education in the military than anywhere else in the country,
Yeah.
right? They're always sending you back to school. You're always learning. That is part of the growth and the investment that the military makes in their soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, coasties. I mean, I think that's something that people don't probably appreciate is the intellectual capacity that veterans bring to the table, no matter what they did. Because for the most part, anyone that joins is going to be taught to do something they have no experience in, artillery or gunnery or maintenance, right? You've proven you can learn a new skill that you didn't have at one point, and you have to be able to do it, at a very high level to be successful. And I think that's something that is probably underappreciated by a lot of people of what that, what you get out of the military experience and how that can translate into the corporate world on the back end.
Yeah, let me talk about what I've seen. And I've spent 30 years in Silicon Valley right now, a dozen different startups, three unicorns. The scarcest, the scarcest object in Silicon Valley is leadership.
Hmm.
That's it. There are plenty of smart people. There are people that know how to build things. There are people that know how to sell things, right? People that know how to market things, right? There are people who know how to run finances. But the hardest quality to find is someone who knows how to lead an organization. And the basic theory, education, and practice I got in the military of leading people proved to be the most valuable aspect of what I brought to organization after organization here in Silicon Valley.
That's super insightful, and I used to say that too. That in the Marine Corps, you got a master's degree in leadership, and that's what
Yeah.
you're really doing every day is learning how to lead. And it's a progression, right? You start off as a second lieutenant, and I used to always talk about my leadership toolbox, and
Yeah.
when I first got in the military, my leadership toolbox is probably a hammer, and I use that in every situation. But over time, you learn and you say, okay, this situation requires a screwdriver, and this one requires a wrench, and you build that toolbox because of the situations you're put in, and the more senior you get in dealing with more civilians as well as military and just different more challenging situations till hopefully again by the time you become more senior you have that toolbox of leadership that is very translatable or can be utilized in any situation, whether that be in the military or obviously in the civilian side as well, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to bring up an example about this because it was occurring to me as I was preparing for this interview. Right. One of the first things you're taught, troop leading procedure, right, is the importance of leaders recon. Right. And I think we look back and say, oh, that should have been obvious. It was not obvious to me at the time. Right. It's like I have recon specialists, right? Aren't they supposed to go do that? And it's like, no, there's no substitute for a leader's recon. Right? What does that mean when you're at a startup and you're trying to figure out what you should build, who you should sell it to, how are you going to construct a values proposition, right? The leader of the organization is the one that has to go out to talk to users, customers, champions, right? This is the equivalent of the leader's recon. You need to be out there engaging with the people who are going to drive the shape of your company to understand it. And this particular task cannot be delegated. I know because I always felt, when I was an executive, it's like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm always putting out fires, right? Can't I just hire some, bright young kid to go do this for me? And it didn't work. And then later on, as a consultant, I think I'm really good at, going and talking to customers or prospects, and I could do this as a consulting gig and, bring them back to the conclusions. But I stopped doing that because it was the wrong thing to do. If you're the founder of a startup, there is no substitute for engaging with prospects, potential customers, potential users, right? Everyone who can influence your market directly, one on one, personally. right? And that's the equivalent of a leader's recon, and you cannot skip that step.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, I
think if
mean,
I hadn't been through infantry school, it wouldn't have occurred to me, what's the context of this? What am I doing?
no, I've never heard it put that way, but it makes perfect sense that you have to be the one out front doing that and have the, I mean, hands on the ground experience, right? You can't hear it from
Yeah,
somebody else. You have to see it, touch it, feel it, know it yourself to make it successful because you're the one that's putting your name on the thing, right? So you better be the one that
you have to.
really knows it, right? So yeah. And
You
how
have to be the expert.
yeah, I mean, you've been in this space now for 30 years. I mean, it's not a normal space, I would say, or it's a non-traditional space
Yeah.
for instance to get into. I'll put it that way, right? I mean, how did you make that transition from the military into this world? Because it isn't something that you hear about all the time, to be candid.
Yeah. No, no, no. And I definitely had a crazy intermediate step. So the intermediate step was I got a job at Lockheed Skunk Works working on the F-22. I'm an engineer, right? That's my academic. So I went from an engineering degree, infantry officer, right? And then Lockheed Skunk Works. And that was a fascinating experience. I have lots of stories about that. Crazy times, great airplanes. Okay. But then, from when I was at Skunk Works, right, we were buying some tools from software startups that were really innovative, right? And that's when it struck me that, I want to be on the startup side, not the big company side. And Skunk Works is not a big company, but Lockheed's a huge company.
Yeah.
And so that's when I made the transition to joining a startup, and I've loved it ever since.
And I will just kind of, I mean, I know it's going back in time a little bit, but did you find the transition process itself to the Skunk Works pretty easy? I mean, it's typically networking, you know somebody, you go over there, and that's a pretty traditional move, right? To go with defense contractor. That's where a lot of folks feel like they
Yeah,
should. How was your transition pretty good? I mean, how was? As I'm always it shows that a lot of folks are transitioning a
it
lot. I'm
was
just curious,
shockingly
what was your
easy.
transition like? Yeah,
This is a transition that no longer appears, which is they ran a newspaper ad and I mailed in a resume. That's how long ago that was. Okay. And
yeah,
basically, the hiring manager looked at my resume and says, "Okay, you have an engineering degree in the area I'm hiring for, and you're ex-military, so I know you can get a TS clearance easily. You're hired." I mean,
I love it. That's awesome.
I'd like to think it was more complicated than that, but I don't think it was.
Whether it is or not, that is a great story to actually have to mail in the resume. That's just old school, but it obviously worked
Old
out great.
school.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty. And now, but I really so then the real pivot came. That was a pretty relatively speaking easy transition. Kind
Yeah,
of a
I think
natural
that's a
transition.
well-trodden path.
Right, right. I think a lot of folks go that way, and some like it, and some don't. And obviously, I think the good news story for you was you figured that out relatively quickly. That hey, this is okay, but there's something more out there. But I mean, again, I think that's also kind of unique. I mean, that is a leap into the unknown to go into the software world ish,
Yeah.
30 years ago. I mean, that's kind of the Wild West, I would have to believe. I mean, did you feel pretty
Yeah.
confident in that? How'd that work
Yeah.
out? I mean, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
so first of all, I've got very fond memories of Skunk Works. It's an excellent organization, right? Having said that, it's not for everyone. So I knew I wanted to be an engineer, like from, very early on. So I have an engineering degree. I started writing code when I was in middle school, right? I'm one of those kids, right? So I knew I wanted to end up in engineering. And then I had this impression that great technology is done at one of the country's great technology labs, right? People, things like AT&T Labs or HP Labs or Lockheed Skunk Works, right? Like Oppenheimer, right? You had to have
Right.
a massive hierarchy, and that getting a PhD just qualifies you basically to be an apprentice, and that the whole thing is driven by brilliant scientists and who carefully plan everything out with lots of experimentation. That was my impression of how the technology world works. Okay. And then when I was at Skunkworks, right, I began seeing things that did not exactly jibe with that. The most innovative technology was not actually coming from out of Skunkworks. It was coming out of startups.
Hmm.
right? And it was like, how is it that this 5-person team can get done, in a month, what 100 people working for the smartest engineering organization in the country can't get done in a year, right? And not just once or twice, but over and over again. And so that's what caused me to become interested in figuring out, how do startups work, right? How is it that again, not once or twice, but over and over again, these little organizations with no resources can produce, world-shaking technology. And that's what was exciting to me.
And how do they do it? What's the secret sauce?
Oh, let me tell you, I've spent 30 years studying how to do it, and there is a secret sauce.
Yeah.
Okay. And the secret, and let me tell you some background. So
Yeah.
I work in a niche which is software developer tools, which is kind of the nerdiest end of the nerdiest part of Silicon Valley, right? These are the tools
Okay.
that developers use. Okay. And it's undergoing profound change right now. All right. And when I first got started in this business, it's like, I'm an engineer. My company is selling to engineers, right? The way to do this is just work with our own engineering team and just be really clear about how it works to our engineering customers, right? And that's what I did. It didn't work, but it didn't stop me from doing it over and over and over again, right? But explaining how it works is not actually the right answer. Okay. Then I remember this. I had a change in my career. I saw the HBO series Mad Men. Have you seen that
Yeah.
series?
Oh yeah.
Don Draper, brilliant series. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh my God, marketing. He is so clever, right? I thought, that's what I've been missing. I need to be more clever. And I became so clever. In conference rooms, I could be the cleverest one of all. And I love doing it, right? And I did this for years. It didn't work. That didn't stop me. I kept doing it over and over again. Being clever does not work when you're selling to engineers. Okay. Then I got a book, right, by Steve Blank, who's a famous Silicon Valley guru, right, called Four Steps to the Epiphany. The book's almost unreadable, but I and a few other people I know read it. The basically, he makes the point, the way to do innovation is to get out of the building and go talk to customers. And I said, all right, nothing else seems to work. I'll give this a shot. And I tried it, and it was amazing what you can learn when you go talk to customers. And the company that I was putting these techniques in place with, the CEO, but it was funny. When I first met the CEO, I pulled this book out of my backpack and said, you have to read this. He pulled the same book out of his backpack. And
Right.
it's like, okay, that's why I wanted to join the company. The company became a unicorn. The company's called Neo4j. It's the leader in graph databases. If you want to, I can explain all that, but it's a great $200 million startup. Okay. Listen to your customers. That's the most important thing. Right. And then after I left that company, went to another startup. Okay. Tried the same techniques, a $5 billion IPO. It's like, wow, this really works. And then for some reason, I felt compelled to try it a third time. Right. Same thing happened, multi-billion dollar unicorn. It's like, okay, we figured this out. The most important thing in producing innovative technology isn't the brilliance of your engineers, although you need that, right? The most important thing is paying attention to your customers, right? Basically, if you're selling to engineers, you have to respect your customers. You have to realize they're as smart as you are. In fact, some of them are going to be smarter than you are, right? You need to involve them in the product design process, okay? Not show up and say, let me give you a demo when the product's all done, but talk to them, get them involved in the product design process. And here's the other step forward, which is understand the problem, not talk about the product. When you talk
Yep.
to them, you talk about their problems. You understand every aspect of the problem, right? And then you can figure out a solution that's actually going to work for them. If you just focus on the product, you're going to miss all sorts of things.
No, it resonates with me a lot because of my time at Amazon, and obviously Amazon did pretty well and continues to do very well. But the Jeff Bezos model was just that. It was like, look, understand your customer, and if you have a customer, and I'll talk about just their the buying aspect and not the AWS side, but the buying aspect of Amazon. Like, if your customer never is going to say they want things that are more expensive and have less selection and take longer to get here. As long as you can focus on, you know, less expensive, get here faster, more selection, you can't go wrong, and it sounds
Yeah.
so simple, but if you do that and then iterate on it and iterate on it, I mean, that's what you get to where you are today, right? And they make some
Let
mistakes
me
along the way,
here's
but
a
that's it, right?
crazy story. I went to college with Jeff Bezos.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, we actually competed for in student run. We both ran movie series on campus. This was back in the day before streaming, before VCRs, when the only way to see a movie was to rent it on film and actually get a projector and show it. Okay, and to make a long story short, I learned a valuable lesson from competing with Jeff Bezos, and the lesson is don't compete with Jeff Bezos.
I think many have learned that as well. That's hilarious though. That is a great story to tell right there. I do like that. Yeah. He was an incredible guy to work for. But again, it sounds you figured it out in your own way, a different kind of path, but same thing. Understand your customer. I mean, be laser focused on your customer, and that has to come first, right? And clearly that's what you took away from that. And again, the engineers, I remember seeing it happen. All the engineers are trying to find the solution to something like that's not that it's not important. It's important. Don't get me wrong. You got to have the engineering in there, but you better understand
Yeah.
what the customer wants from the get go, or you're going to build something that's beautiful but nobody ever uses, right? And I'm sure that happens all the time.
I've
You know,
seen
right?
so many startups, brilliant technology, but here's the subtle thing. It's brilliant technology that solves no one's top 3 problem, right?
Right.
That's the death because you have a piece of technology and it solves someone's number 10 problem and it solves someone else's number 9 problem and someone else's number 7 problem. No one is going to spend any time looking at it. Okay? It's much better if you spend the time upfront, right? And you figure out for this set of people, right? This is a top 3 problem and we are going to solve it for them. Okay. And understanding exactly that. These are the companies that get traction. The companies that say, oh, we have some technology, it'll be good for the company as a whole, but doesn't solve any one person's particular problem, that will never get adopted. And that'll be so frustrating because the demos will all go great, right? But no one will
Yeah.
actually adopt it.
Yeah. And then how did you? I mean, you obviously moved through three different companies where you saw the potential of
Yeah.
the software tools that you went and invested in because they did solve that kind of problem. Was that the
Yeah.
work that you did? I mean, kind of the mental math that you did to kind of figure out or to understand the market. I mean, is that where you feel like you had, I don't know, an advantage in this space was understanding the needs of the market, or how did you feel like you were tapping into what customers needed? Because that's the
Yeah.
hardest thing. I mean, it's not, and you've done it several times. So you must be doing something right.
So because I've been a professional software developer and I've been through a whole cycle of products, right? I knew what the pain points were, and believe me, there's no end of pain points in software development, right? It's another aspect of learning to love the suck. Okay, and so anytime that an entrepreneur could come to me and says, "Here's this particular pain point, everyone hates it. There are a million people in the world experiencing this pain point every day." And I know a better way. It's like that's always appealing to me, right? And so yeah, I mean, software. This is 2025, right? We've been doing software for 70 years, right? Software still sucks, right? It's true, right? And it's not finished, and it's not because we don't have the smartest people in the world working on it. I think we do, right? It's the tools that they're using are still really bad, right? And it led me to question, why are the tools so bad? Because the smartest subset of the smartest people are working on software tools, okay? And the answer is they're all brilliant engineers. No one has ever trained them how to tell a story that gets widespread rapid adoption. So that's kind of my niche. I work with engineers, right, to teach them how to tell a better story about their products.
I love it. I love
And
it. Well, I
it's a
know
tiny niche,
you've
but
actually
so
you,
important.
you've done it so much. You've actually written a book about it. I don't know if now's a good time to
Yeah.
talk about what you've kind of your
Oh,
lessons learned from
thank
this.
you
And
for that
yeah, yeah,
softball question, right? So
yeah.
I have a book right here, The Developer Facing Startup, right? And it's written for founders of startups, early stage startups that their main audience is software developers. Doesn't have to be their exclusive audience, has to be an audience that they are trying to influence. And my main thesis is that developers are different, right? Developers come from a different culture than business executives. And if you try and use the same techniques that work on business executives on them, right, it'll backfire, right? And the developers will ignore you or worse, right? But that doesn't mean nothing works. It means you have to understand the culture of engineering and software development and use that to your advantage. Okay. Let me give you some examples before people say that's baloney, right? My rule number 0, and that's kind of a pun because everyone else starts counting from 1, developers start counting from 0. Rule number 0 is no puffery, right? Puffery, you walk by a restaurant and they say, we have the best coffee in town, right? That's puffery. Do you actually believe they have the best coffee in town? No, but they're proud of their coffee. It's probably not bad, right? But you tell your product that you've got the best X in the world, and a developer looks at it and says, yeah, who says, right? Show me the data. Who did the tests? Can I reproduce I can reproduce the test, right? Who were the candidates, right? What were the criteria? What was the judging? Give me all those details. And if you can't do that, then it's not puffery. You're lying to me. All right. You are lying to me because you're trying to sell me something. And so your credibility has immediately gone below 0. It's like, not only am I not going to buy this because you claim to be the best coffee in town, I'm going to tell everyone I know not to even try it because you're lying. Part of engineering culture is that engineers do not lie to other engineers. Okay. And you never want to break that because engineers, they have to build things that work.
Yeah.
Right? If a peer or a colleague tells you, oh yeah, use this system, use this technology to make something work, and it doesn't work, it's like, that's the end. It's like, no, how are you going to recover from that? Okay. So the flip side of no puffery is that the best proof is social proof. Why is social proof the best proof? Because developers don't lie to other developers, right? The same sense of I have 0 trust in vendors means I've got 100% trust in my colleagues, or at least so much as I can see them. It's a different set of things. It's a different set of values from most business executives.
And I do, it's interesting just the cultural piece of it. 'Cause I talk about culture a lot when talking to veterans, because you're
Mm.
obviously leaving behind a culture that we all had in the military, and you're going into, and for many people, a very different world where the rules don't, or they're just different, right? I mean, it's not that they're good or bad. This is a different world, and how do you adapt to that? And I think that's probably similar to what you're saying in some ways, is that some people figure it out and can adapt pretty quickly and kind of find their niche. But sometimes for veterans, it is hard to adapt to that. It's a new language, it's a new way of talking to people, it's a new way of communicating that can take a little while to understand. Now, once you understand it, you can be super successful. I think that's some of the things that you've been able to do. You've been able to take your military time,
Yeah.
translate that into engineer speak, the culture of software development, and then be able to really make it other people understand and bring them together and talk, right? Because again, you can have people in the same room, and I've certainly seen it. Engineers getting so frustrated with the salespeople, because they don't
Yeah.
really know what they're saying. Like, we got to sell more. They're like, well, it's not. It's just, it's fascinating. It can be really contentious because they have different goals in mind, right? One guy's trying to sell and one guy's trying to make the perfect mousetrap. And how do you get them aligned? I mean, again, I assume you've been in those discussions a pretty good bit of how do you balance that to become successful? I mean, any thoughts on how do you become that leader in the room that has the vision and say, okay, because at some point there has to be a priority of what's the most important thing, and there's limited resources, right, in some of these smaller places, but you still have to sell eventually, right? So you have to be able to have a little bit of that, they call it puffery, but just some branding, marketing, something,
Well,
right?
I'll
But
say you need swagger.
yeah,
Okay, that's
okay,
essential, right? But
okay,
but swagger is different than puffery is making a claim unsupported by
yeah,
evidence. And
fair,
neither you nor your prospect expects there to be any evidence, right?
yeah,
Swagger derives from the fact that you've done something hard, but you've got the facts to back it up, right? You've got a customer who can give you a reference saying, yeah, I solved this problem with this new technology. It's pretty amazing, right? At the very least, you've got a demo and you can say, look, you thought this was impossible, but here, I'm going to open up my laptop and in 60 seconds, your jaw will drop, right? Getting told that what you describe as impossible is actually the best type of objection to get, because then you can just show them, right?
Yeah.
That's how you overcome that, right? The worst type of objection is, that's interesting, but I just don't care about it, because
Yeah.
there's no way you can make someone care, right? When
Right.
fundamentally they don't. Okay. But the key, I want to get back, the main thing I took out of my military experience is the importance of communication.
Hmm.
Okay. And here's a classic. The 5-paragraph op order, right, has become the outline of every business plan and marketing plan I've ever written.
Huh.
Okay. So many people neglect the basics. They don't understand what the mission of the organization is, right? Because no one's ever told them, right?
Right.
And being able to sit down there and think and say, I need to summarize our mission in one sentence that everyone in this organization will be able to understand. That's super important. Okay. Something that was drilled into me at infantry school over and over and over again, right? The commander's intent, right, becomes, what's the founder's vision for this organization? Okay, that's the same thing. It's like, what does when we're successful, what does the world look like?
Hmm.
Right? In the military, that's called commander's intent, right? In the startup world, that's called, what's the founder's vision? But it's the same thing, right? Can you imagine a change in the world that your organization wants to make possible, right? That will make the world better, right? How do you come up with that, and how do you communicate that effectively that everyone in your organization will understand? Okay, these are core foundational principles, right, that translate directly from the military into the world of startups.
I,
There's a more sophisticated one as well.
yeah, no, that is so spot on. I think the challenge a lot of times is, to get that commander's intent, if you will, as your company grows, right? When it's three or four people that started together and had that, and as you're adding though, have you seen ways to be able to inculcate that into a company? Because again, I feel
Yeah.
my feeler is that when I feel like I saw it at Amazon, as it got so big, you lost a little bit of what that that scrappiness that we had, working off a door, and then all of a sudden now it's big build. It's just there's something that you can lose. I think if you don't have a laser focus on that commander's intent, especially as they're adding new people from beyond the founders or some of the original investors, if you will.
Yeah. Strategy. Let me tell you, people don't know what strategy is,
Hmm.
right? The best strategic plans can be communicated in 5 words or less. Okay, and you've just shown it to me right now, because you were able to repeat Jeff Bezos' strategy for the company,
Yeah,
right? Be like, I believe, the most customer obsessed company,
yeah.
right? That's it. That's the strategy, right? And if you look back at military strategies, they're not, 30-page plans. That's not a strategy, right? The best strategy military strategist that the United States ever produced is General Marshall, right? What was the strategy that he brought President Roosevelt after Pearl Harbor? Okay, here was the strategy. It was Europe first.
Hmm.
2 words, okay?
Yeah.
That was the strategy. And once people understood that, okay, everything else flowed out of it, right? What type of units are we going to need? What type of technology do we need to develop, right? How do we invest? What type of armies and navies do we raise, right? Where do we go? Who are the important allies we need to invest in? Everything derives from that. And it could have been different, right? You think about December 1941. I mean, that's before my time. I'm guessing it's before your time too, right? We had just been attacked by Japan, right? But Marshall was able to think about it and say, no, the plan's going to work is we need to do Europe first. Japan first is not going to work. And he was able to make the case for that. And the entire war derived out of the decisions that were made in December 1941. Okay, companies need to be able to sum up their strategy in a very short sentence that everyone can understand. Okay, and okay, from my own experience, right? Let me think of some strategies that I brought my CEOs, right? And this is not going to make sense to most of your people unless you're in software development, right? At Neo4j, we were the world's leading graph database. That was it. Everything else was a detail. That was the strategy, right? We had this crazy feature called a graph model. We were a database, and it was like, no, this is what we're going to feature front and center. Okay, we're going to convince the world they need to use graphs. Okay, and we're going to convince the world that we're the world's leading vendor of that. And crazily enough, we did. Partly because we kept it that simple. And at every other company I've been at, we've been able to, get the strategy down to 4 or 5 words that everyone understands, and that guides product development. That guides sales strategy. Customers know, what your point of view is. Everything derives on, can you simplify your strategy to where you can communicate it in less than 1 sentence?
I love that. Napoleon's corporal, right? You have to have the most
Yeah.
junior guy. If they can understand it, and it's not a 30-page document, that's the key, right? Goes down to the
Oh
last
my
page.
God.
The most junior guy.
And Google. Can you recall? Do you know what Google is about? I'll tell you what, the last strategy I remember is,
Yeah.
the world's information, information at your fingertips,
Mm,
right? That's it. They don't classify, oh, this type of information, that type of
yeah.
information. It's like, if it's
Exactly.
out there, we want it to be available, right? Giant organization, moving fast. Now, IBM's strategy, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm in the technology
They
business.
got lost somewhere, right? And that's part of it.
Yeah.
They lost their whatever their core was, got lost, and that's the side effect. If you do lose that and try to do everything, you do nothing, right? I think you were trying to do you just they lost their path in some way, shape, or form. Obviously,
Yeah.
down the line. Yeah,
Great strategies. The basically, the fewer words you need, the better the strategy. Europe first was the best strategy that the U.S. military strategy the U.S. ever developed.
I
Okay,
love
perhaps until we decided to, destroy Fordo. I
it.
understand that plan. That's a 2-word plan.
How, have you seen any impact? And again, I don't know how much you are involved with this these days, but it seems to be the buzzword du jour is just the AI impact on
It's
software
massive.
development. Is it now? I mean, it's there, right? I mean, what do you see
It's
the impact of AI
okay.
on
So
these?
let me briefly, over the last 30 years, I've seen 5 major technology waves. Okay, when I first got started, we were still in the PC wave, right? The idea that you had a personal computer, that everyone had one, right? That changed a lot of things. But it took a while for everyone to catch on, right?
Yep.
When they first came out, if if you saw one when it first came out and said every professional is going to have one of these on their desks, right? That would be, no, they would say that's a toy, right? Some, nerds and geeks will have one, but no one else. That was the accepted parents. But no, today you cannot be a professional without your own computer, right? Then when the internet came along, I remember the first time I ever saw a web page. It was like, I thought it was stunning, so useful, so amazing. But if you had told people every professional is going to spend most of their working hours in front of a web browser, right? That would have been crazy when it first came out. Okay. The iPhone, right? Cell phones are so useful. Every adult human is going to own a cell phone. That would have been crazy. Okay. But it's true. Okay. People get cell phones before they get computers in developing
Yeah.
countries because
Yeah.
they have to, right? Social media. Oh, what a toy. It's like every human will be attached to social media. It's like, that was a stunning result and happened pretty fast. But those are the 4 main technology changes up till 2 years ago. Okay. AI is being adopted faster than any of those 4. Today, if you tell someone, oh yeah, in a handful of years, every professional will, they'll have all of their interactions intermediated by an AI, people don't think that's crazy. People say, yeah, I see that coming. Okay, so I view AI as the fastest change of all of those 5 technology waves. And if you think back from a historical basis, because I'm a historian, I love to do that, right? We've had other technology waves that came really fast. Okay. The car was adopted over a period of like 20 years in the US. Electricity, 1920s, people remember it was a boom time. Why was it boom time? That was the decade of electrification in the
Hmm.
US. Okay, we went from most people not having electricity in their houses in 1910, right, to almost everyone having electricity by 1930. Okay, it produced an enormous gain in wealth and changed everything, right?
Yeah.
Radio, washing machines, refrigeration, right? The everything changed. So electricity was big, but it took 20 years to get adopted. AI will be fully adopted, in 5 to 10 years.
Is it having a profound impact on the software industry in particular?
Oh,
I mean, it
so
seems like
much.
and it's more accessible. It seems like, right? That maybe that's the way I describe it. It's like I can't code, but I mean, I feel like I could code if I used AI. I could like do anything. I don't know. It's crazy, you know.
You probably could, and
Yeah,
and it's having severe impact. Software developers, right, are among the most advanced and most sophisticated users of AI. And
yeah.
it turns out that coding with AI is unmistakably faster than
Hmm.
coding the way that it was done 5 years ago. Okay? Coding is a lot of work, right? You gotta embrace the suck, right? Part of it is being creative, part of it's being brilliant, a lot of it's just hard work and attention to detail.
Yeah.
Okay. And if AI can help you with the hard work and attention to detail, right? Saying, oh, I've got some code. I'm going to have my AI go check out these 100 things and make sure they're all exactly correct. It's like, wow, that's stuff I didn't need to do, right? And I can spend my time thinking about what do I want this application to actually do? How do I want it to look and interact with the user instead of making sure I handle every error condition correctly, right? Even the ones that will never happen. It's like so there's a tremendous productivity aid to using AI as part of coding, but it's changing coding in a massive way, right? And just one example that doesn't occur to a lot of people, the amount of code that individuals and organizations are writing is increasing by an order of magnitude.
Hmm.
Right, I call this the big code problem, and because and this a lot of this is AI driven, because it's increasing at such a large rate, all of the existing infrastructure for managing, creating, testing, storing code is breaking,
Hmm.
right? And needs to be rewritten for something that's 1 and possibly 2 orders of magnitude bigger.
Sounds like the next big idea. You getting on that? You jump on that one.
I do, I do. So I work, most of what I do is I work as a coach and advisor for startups, and I'm part of an accelerator based here in San Francisco. And for the last 2 years, I'd say close to 90% of the startups are AI focused.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes you know, but I'm tangential to it. I'm talking to folks that want to get into it, certainly into defense tech, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of AI connected to that with drones and so much that is all connected to that. So it's everywhere. You can't avoid it. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's exactly it, but it's so exciting. It's like you've got a chance to say, "Oh, I wish I got involved in PCs in 1980, right?"
Yeah,
Or "I wish I
yeah,
got involved in the internet with back in 1991." And it's
yep.
like, well, people know AI is here. It's going to be bigger than PCs, bigger than the internet, and the timing is now.
That's it. That's it. Some great advice. Well, it's been I've really enjoyed talking to you today and just under the history lessons, and more than anything though, the applicability that you've talked about of the experience in the military, how you've taken the OODA loop, how you've taken the idea of the SMEAC in the 5 paragraph order, and translated that into the startup space and made it more digestible for the civilian world to understand and how maybe to value a veteran more because they should be able to do all those things. They don't even know it a lot of times. Veterans don't appreciate
Yeah.
that they have these skill sets and they don't appreciate, certainly don't appreciate how to make them come through on a resume a lot of times, right? They don't know how to tell their
Yeah.
story very well. And I think what you've been able to identify and is that, hey, these are things that you can do, tangible things that you can do to translate your skills, to make yourself a value add in corporate America. You have these skills, but you don't even know it. Just you need to maybe think about it a little bit and ruminate on some. But those skills are things that are going to be valuable in the civilian sector, and you've been able to kind of see that in your career, and now helping others, I assume, to do the same thing. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
and sometimes and some of my clients are military veterans, and so
Yeah.
when I talk about void loops with them, it's like they remember that, right? And some people, it's a brand new idea, and I need to introduce it from the beginning.
It's a great one. It's simple. It's a Marine can figure it out. I got it, and it's stuck with me this many years later. Well, I'd love last plug for your book or last plug for what you're doing. Anything you want to share with the audience today that's out there?
Yeah, I'll just give one bit of advice. If you're thinking of founding a startup, talk to your customers. It's so simple, but you'd be surprised how many founders think that's not a prerequisite for founding a company. Think, oh, I just need to build this product first, before I talk to them. And it's like, no, talk to your customers.
I love it. That's leadership 101. You can't just be the inventor. You got to be the leader. And the leader
Yeah.
has to talk to customers and get out there and get that and do that leader's recon. And I think that's
Yes.
a pivotal piece of advice you shared today. Hey, thank you again, Adam, for the time. I really enjoyed chatting and I wish you the best of luck moving forward and hope our paths cross
Okay.
soon.
Thank you so much, Beau. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.